The Tennis Gambling Podcast on the Sports Gam Podcast Network is brought to you by Nordic Fantasy. Get up to 1K in a pause match when you sign up on Nordic Fantasy, the promo code SGPN. And welcome, everybody, to the Tennis Gam Podcast here on the Sports Gam Podcast Network. It is currently Thursday night, July 24th, around 11 p.m. Eastern Time. I'm Rosso Escarachel, once again going solo for this pod. Time to get into the semis in Kitzbuhel and Umag taking place on Friday. So we're going to break down all four matches. The reason why the episode is so late is because I was waiting for a semifinal line to drop in Umag. It never dropped. So unfortunately, we are missing a line. I don't know why they haven't posted the to Zoomer and to Burner lines yet, but I was trying to wait it out. Unfortunately, though, I couldn't wait any longer, so we are going to be recording, but we are missing a line. So apologies there, but either way, we waited as long as we could. Anyway, before we get into the actual recap of the quarters and before we break down the matchups on Friday, a reminder that you can help support the show by liking and subscribing on YouTube, and a reminder you can also leave a rating and a review on Spotify or Apple, as the podcast is available on those platforms as well. So once again, whether you are listening to it in live stream format or video format on YouTube, or whether you are listening to it audio only on Spotify or Apple, that's fine. But don't forget to leave a rating and a review on Spotify and Apple to help the show grow. And don't forget to leave a like and subscribe on the YouTube channel. Anyway, a reminder, check out the merch store on the SGPN website. We have a lot of great tennis merch. We have shirts, we have t-shirts, sweatshirts, mugs, etc. Different colors, very affordable, very comfortable. So check that out as well. And a reminder that we do have the Sports Gam Podcast, which is back with their 32 NFL team previews. They're also bringing back the phrase that pays. Each episode, they'll give out a word of a 32-word phrase. Submit the phrase for a chance to win a 1K circa future. Anyway, starting off with the actual recap of the matches on Thursday, we had a very good episode. Ended up sweeping the lock and dog. So for the actual lock, we had Rinderknech team total over the 12.5 games at minus 110 against Hoffman. Match went to 3 sets. Surprisingly, did not have a 7-5 or a 7-6, but Rinderknech won, and eventually he got there in the third set. So nice win for us for the lock. For the dog, we had Bublik in straight sets. We've been backing him as he has refound his, I'd say, understanding of clay, and he's been really good on clay. But Bublik ended up killing Shevchenko in straight sets. It was a carbon copy of the match a week ago in Gstaad. Shevchenko's just not very good on clay. And Bublik suddenly has a perfect understanding of clay, and that's why he made the quarters in the French Open, but never in doubt, as Bublik did win in straight sets comfortably. So really no sweat at all. Even Rinderknech did win the first set, so we actually could afford him losing the second set. But overall, a good episode for us. We didn't win everything, including the actual predictions that were not the lock and dog picks, but still can't complain. Anytime you sweep the lock and dog, try to do it again here in the semifinal episode right now. Now, for the quarterfinal recap, though, a couple of very competitive matchups and a couple that were pretty straightforward. For Kitzbuhel, said before, Rinderknech won in 3. Not competitive, though, in the third set because Rinderknech won 6-1. Hoffman ran out of gas, just simply put, and Rinderknech's serve was too much for Hoffman to handle as he won in 3. Second time, he's been a semifinalist here in Kitzbuhel. We'll see if he gets to the final for the first time in his career. Kaza ended up beating Struff in straight sets as he was very, very sharp, did not get broken, and he had a pretty decent lead in each set pretty quickly, but nice job by him winning in straight sets. Bublik ended up beating Shevchenko in straight sets again, and you saw Zanchel beat Kitzbuhel Wild in straight sets. Did like the over on that one. That didn't get there as the, once again, second set kind of died there in the late stages, as you saw Kitzbuhel Wild have a couple chances to maybe go up a break in the second set, fell apart, but we did think Zanchel would win that one. So mainly solid for Kitzbuhel, not much drama, as you had one 3-setter, which was a very lopsided third set, and the other matches were all in straight sets. So not too much drama, but either way, still a pretty solid collection of matches for us because we had the lock and dog in Kitzbuhel, and we got those two right. For Umag, though, you had a pretty, I'd say, slow start to the day, and then it slowly built into some chaos as the day went on. So Carabelli ended up beating Llamas Ruiz in straight sets. We liked the over in the matchup, didn't matter, as you ended up seeing Llamas Ruiz technically not lose in straight sets. He was about to, which is why I said that Carabelli was going to win in straight sets, but you saw Llamas Ruiz quit. So he quit one game short of the finish line, which means every total bet voided, and our future with Carabelli lives, so can't complain there. Taberner, though, showed no signs of fatigue after beating Cerundolo in the marathon as he beat De Jong in straight sets. He looked really good and eventually kind of took over the end of that second set. Then you had the two matches of the day, which was, I'll save the best match for last, actually. De Zoomer ended up beating Droget in 3, lost the first set, came back and he won, and then you ended up seeing Droget kind of get injured there in the third set, couldn't move that well, and De Zoomer, simply put, just kept the ball in play, moved him side to side, and Droget had no answers. So nice win there for De Zoomer, and definitely a good comeback by him. Having said that, there is one match that I have to talk about, which was definitely the match of the day. Despite the scoreline looking a bit lopsided in each set, the Prismic match against Darderi was absolutely incredible. Now, Prismic won the first set 6-1 in like 25 minutes. Darderi was down a break, and then he basically punted on the set, and you ended up seeing Prismic look very, very good. Then Darderi upped the aggression and upped the emotion of the actual match. I'm trying to think of a good comp, and I guess it's kind of fitting because the guy actually passed away today. It reminded me a little bit, I know it's before I was born, like when Hulk Hogan in the old wrestling matches used to Hulk up and he was losing, and then suddenly he would start like losing his mind and like shaking around and screaming, and that would be basically the source of him becoming this indestructible, I'd say, wrestler. That was what we saw with Darderi. As Darderi, after losing the first set, started screaming at the crowd. He started trying to scream after every point to hype himself up. And at some point, he got himself into a certain flow state, I guess, where he was using the added energy and the overall, I guess anger is the word you might want to use, to just snap him out of the funk he was in. And it worked, because he was really good in the last two sets. But either way, Darderi came back and eventually did win in 3. Prismic played very well. It felt like Darderi, with the firepower, was just hitting his spots too much. Prismic, though, very, very impressive performance. It was the match of the day. Prismic, I thought, played, honestly, like a top 20 player. He was really good in the match. But unfortunately, Darderi just would not miss his spots, and Prismic's serve is still a relatively weak link for him, and it felt like it was kind of falling apart there in the third set. For example, he ended up landing over 67% of his first serves in the first two sets. That dropped to 50% in the third set. And his second serve is just not good enough to get by if he's not landing enough first serves. But Darderi looked really, really good after a really bad first set. And right now, he looks like the guy to beat in the event. But that was definitely the match of the day. Very entertaining. And I had a good time watching the entire thing. Unfortunately, though, the angle that I had for the match didn't work out, as I liked Darderi to win the first set in the match, and unfortunately, he did lose the first set. But still, thought 160, 165 was too cheap for Darderi, and it was, as he ended up winning that matchup. But definitely the match of the day as a whole. Very entertaining, very fun, and Darderi got the job done. It felt like while I was watching that match, I know that it's going to sound disrespectful to the other players in the field. It felt like whoever won that matchup was going to win the tournament. So we'll see if Darderi can keep it going. But the form Darderi showed in those last two sets, it's going to be really tough to beat him. I'll put it that way, if he's able to regain that form again for the next couple of rounds. Now there was some news going on for tennis purposes, which involved our boy, the one that we make fun of all the time on the show, Tsitsipas, because he ended up firing his coach. Now, we know Ivanisevic took over after Djokovic fired him a couple of months ago, and he ended up deciding, I'm going to help Tsitsipas out. Tsitsipas ended up firing him, and he had a couple of quotes, which I'll read one of, because it's a pretty long one, I'll skip it. He said, quote, "It is very difficult to have dictators and people who speak negatively, and you don't feel like they are close to you like family." So let me get this straight, Tsitsipas. You had your dad as a coach. It didn't work. You got rid of him because you wanted to improve your game dramatically. You ended up hiring a guy who was supposed to be kind of the opposite of your dad in a way because you wanted to branch out. You had him for about 2 or 3 weeks and decided he doesn't make you feel like family. Am I getting that right? You fired your father to hire another coach, and then you got mad that he wasn't treating you like family? Really? Tsitsipas? All right. Anyway, a point is, I know that even Ivanisevic had some quotes about how Tsitsipas wasn't really prepared, and he basically called him soft. And the fact is, Tsitsipas didn't take kindly to it. Why? Because he is very, very soft. I thought that it was a pretty embarrassing decision to hire him and then fire him this quickly. I don't believe they played a tournament together. So Tsitsipas showed up for, I think it was the Hopman Cup, and he ended up losing to a Goot, I think, but that was an exhibition. I don't know if I actually care about that. The point is, he ended up hiring a coach who was supposed to help change his potential game, and he immediately abandoned the plan and fired the guy within 2 weeks. So not exactly a great look for Tsitsipas, I'll put it that way. I thought that it was hilarious, and I agree with Ivanisevic. I think that Tsitsipas is soft. I think that he is a loser, simply put. I know that he's had some success on the tour. He's won some 1,000 titles. I know that he made the final of a couple of Grand Slams. That's not the point. The point is, if everybody criticizes how seriously you take the game, and the fact is you spend a lot of time on Twitter tweeting out random cheesy things, and you're complaining that the results are not good enough for your standard, you bring in a coach who holds you accountable, and you immediately fire the guy, it makes you look very soft, which we knew. So I wanted to mention that. I know Ivanisevic maybe shouldn't have said some of the comments about Tsitsipas publicly. Was he wrong? No. I think we'd all agree his comments were correct, but Tsitsipas didn't take kindly to it, and he ended up firing Ivanisevic. I don't take him seriously as a player anyway, so this was kind of the cherry on top for me. But it's a pretty rough look for Tsitsipas. You bring in a hard-nosed coach to keep you in check, to hold you accountable, and you immediately pull the plug because you're being held accountable. It feels like a very, very loser mentality move by Tsitsipas, and I, once again, don't expect him to do anything for the rest of the year. Anyway, I wanted to mention that, which was the main piece of, I'd say, tennis Twitter drama, or overall tennis news, which was Tsitsipas firing his coach. There are rumors he might bring his dad back. Good luck with that. But anyway, point is that was the main storyline that happened over the course of the day. Besides Venus Williams losing to Frech handily, not going to add much. The fact is she won a round somehow at 45. She got destroyed. It happens. The fact is she beat Stearns. I got nothing else to add. Good for Venus. She'll be there in Cincinnati. She'll probably be in the U.S. Open as well. Not going to roast her at all. She got killed. It's fine. She won a round. Nobody thought she would. Good for Venus. Anyway, a point is time to move on into the actual breakdown of the matches in the semis in Kitzbuhel and in Umag. Before we get into the actual breakdown of those matches, a reminder that we are brought to you by our sponsor, Circa, because they're hosting the world's biggest football contest for the NFL. Circa Million, Circa Survivor, Circa Grandissimo, over 21 million in guaranteed prizes. You could always, once again, join before the season starts. And a reminder that you cannot call yourself a true DGen unless you're competing in the Circa football contest. Coming out with SGPN at the Circa contest weekend, August 21st, 23rd, for an amazing weekend, including live shows and open bars. Plus, you get 15% off a stay at the Circa with promo code SGP15. Contests are open to everyone. Sign up in Nevada. Play from anywhere with the help of SGPN's official proxy. Go to footballcontest.com. Use code SGP. $50 off your proxy fees. We're also brought to you by Arctic Fantasy because they're doing Best Ball Mania happening all summer long. Give away 15 million in prizes, including 2 million for first place. No waiver wire, no arguments about trades. Best Ball is the best way to play fantasy football. They also have a great option for Pick'em on Underdog. If you want to try doing some entries, you win up to 500 times your entry. And a reminder, when you sign up for a new account, use the code SGPN. They get a special pick and a first time deposit offer up to 1K in bonus cash on fantasy promo code SGPN. Welcome back, everyone, to the Tennis Game Podcast. Finished going through the recap of the matches on Thursday. Time to move on into the matchups taking place on Friday, starting off with Kitzbuhel. So for these matches, first one, you're going to have two Frenchmen going at it. You have Rinderknech taking on Kaza. Shout out to Rinderknech, who got the job done there for us with the lock on the last show. For this one, he's a dog. Kaza's minus 155. Rinderknech is plus 135. For the spread, I see minus 1.5 for Kaza at minus 116. See Rinderknech plus 1.5 at minus 104. For the over-under, I see 23.5 games. For the over 2.5 sets, I see around plus 125. Now, they faced off on clay, actually, a couple years ago, and you saw Kaza win handily. Now, that was, once again, a long time ago, but it is worth mentioning they faced off in Bordeaux, so it was in France and a challenger, and Kaza did win in straight sets, 6-2, 6-3. Wasn't close. He buried him. Does it matter? Maybe, maybe not. But the point is, I do think you can argue that Kaza is a worthy favorite in this matchup. Now, the line actually moved heavily in this matchup. It was around minus 120 as soon as the line went public. And then money poured in on Kaza, and now he's minus 155. So I understand Rinderknech with the overall path has not had an easy road so far because he's gone to a third set in every single match. He ended up beating Hoffman in 3, beat Gambus in 3, and beat Bagnus in 3. So the competition's been interesting because Bagnus, I think, is a pretty good clay player, and yet at the same point, he was also a qualifier. So you saw Rinderknech down a break in the third come back. I'm also salty a bit that Rinderknech is in the semis because I gave out Bagnus at 100-1, and Rinderknech stole his path to the semis, which kind of sucks. Now, of course, it's assuming you get the same outcomes. I'm aware that's not how it works. But taking an 100-1 shot and then having his opponent in the first round make it to the semis kind of stings a little bit, not going to lie. Now, for the actual path for Rinderknech, once again, decent competition. Gambus hadn't won a main draw match in a while, and Hoffman was off a marathon against Baez. Seemed like he wasn't fully there physically as the match went on, but either way, he did end up winning each of those matches in 3 sets. Kaza, though, has been looking very sharp. Beat Buse in 3 sets in the first match. Then he's been rolling. Beat Comasanya in straight sets and beat Struff in straight sets. Comasanya, I think, is a solid clay player, and the fact is Struff, even though he's had a pretty underwhelming year with that serve and how he was playing in qualifying and in the first couple rounds of this tournament, he was in good form. And the fact is, Kaza went through him like he was nothing. So I do think the two opponents, though, Comasanya, mainly Struff, with the serve speed, should be a good, I say, preparation match for Kaza in this one, because Rinderknech, we know, has a good serve, not really known for his rally tolerance and his overall shot selection. So I do think that Kaza, if he's able to keep the ball in play, should have some advantages the longer the rally goes. Now, I do think for this matchup, the right player is favored. I think Kaza has looked like the better player up to this point. You could argue it's better competition because Comasanya, I think, is a solid clay player, and Struff, we know, can be dangerous on the courts here in altitude in Kitzbuhel, and Kaza beat both of them in straight sets. As for Rinderknech, once again, he's beaten a couple of, I'd say, pretty good clay players, but the draw itself, I'd say, was favorable in hindsight. So based on that, I'll go Kaza in this one. Problem is 155 feels kind of steep now. It was a lot better at minus 120. I don't want to chase the steam at 155. Give me the games instead. I'll take Kaza minus 1.5 games at around minus 116. I know he keeps winning, and he keeps surviving these marathons, but I wonder at what point will Rinderknech's body start to slow down due to fatigue if he keeps going to 3 sets in every match. Kaza, though, is younger. He's had an easier go of it in terms of time spent on court. I think that he's the worthy favorite. I think he's looked better in this one. Give me Kaza minus the 1.5 games for this matchup. Moving on to the next matchup here in Kitzbühel. This is going to be the one between Bublik and Dzanchulp. So for this one, Bublik is minus 330. You have Dzanchulp at around plus 268. For the spread, minus 3.5 for Bublik, plus 3.5 for Dzanchulp, and the over-under is set at around 22.5 games, give or take. For the actual set spread, you have Bublik in straight sets at minus 110. You have Dzanchulp to win a set at minus 120, and the over 2.5 sets is around plus 145. Faced off a couple times in their careers, but none of them were on clay, for the record, and they've been close. In fact, you have seen each player win a set in each of the first 2 matches. Faced off in the Davis Cup in 2022, Dzanchulp won in 3. Faced off in Basel last year, and Bublik retired, but Dzanchulp was also tied 1 set apiece with Bublik. So you've seen a pretty competitive head-to-head between the two of them. However, that was on hard court, and this is on clay. And Bublik has been in great form. He's off a title in Gstaad, and he's been rolling ever since because he also has won every set so far in Kitzbühel. 6 straight matches. He's won 5 of the 6 in straight sets. He's been really good. Dzanchulp, though, can be very, very underwhelming at times. When he's on, he can beat Alcaraz in the U.S. Open in straight sets. He's starting to find his form a bit more. Beat Jari in 3 sets in the first round. Beat Misalic and beat Seabolt Wild. Not going to lie, a pretty solid trio of clay players. And Dzanchulp looked good. I dropped a set to Jari, but after that, he's been really good. And I think you're looking at a spot where Bublik is a worthy favorite. Do I think he should be minus 330? It's a bit much. I'd probably have him at around minus 250 if I had to price him myself. Still a decent-sized favorite, but I do think that 330 is kind of egregious. Now, the question is, where's the value on this one? Do I think Bublik wins in straight sets, or do I think there's a better option to consider Bublik? The problem that I run into for Dzanchel was that his second serve was abysmal against Seabolt Wild in the match on Thursday. And I feel like you might see a pretty similar story to what we saw with Bublik and Shevchenko, because Shevchenko's second serve was getting picked apart by the Bublik return game. And I question if Dzanchel doesn't land enough first serves, can he survive with a lackluster second serve right now? I'm skeptical. I'll put it that way. Having said that, even with the bad second serve Shevchenko has, there was a 6-4 set in there, and I do think that Bublik can still get this done either in 2 or 3. So instead, I'm going Bublik team total over 12.5 at around minus 130, give or take. I think it's a decent price. I think that Dzanchel is good enough on clay to make one set competitive. Bublik can win in straight sets with a 7-5 or 7-6. He could win in 3. He could even lose in 3. Couple ways to get there, kind of like the Rinderknech argument that I made for the lock last episode. Do think that Bublik can find himself in a tough matchup here. He was not broken by Shevchenko in the match on Thursday. Shevchenko had ample chances. He just blew every one of them. So I do think that there might be some breaks potentially available for Dzanchel, and I do think that Bublik's serve was very good. The first serve was crazy against Shevchenko, but I do think Dzanchel can capitalize on Bublik's second serve, and I do think that Bublik's occasional double faulting issues might hand over chances for Dzanchel to break. So instead of trying to get cute with it, taking Bublik in straight sets, again, you could argue is the safe play. I'll go for a different approach. Give me Bublik team total over instead. I think Bublik wins the match, but I do think it could be closer than people think. And I'm not going to automatically write off the idea of Dzanchel winning a hypothetical set. I think it's possible. Not saying it's going to happen, but I do feel a lot better about Bublik winning in straight sets against Shevchenko than I do against Dzanchel, because I really think Shevchenko is not good on clay. Give me Dzanchel to hang in there for at least a set. Give me Bublik team total over as my play there at 12.5 at around minus 130. Moving on to the matchups taking place in Umag. So for this one, first matchup, we have what should be the match of the day if I had to, actually, I don't know about that, because we're looking at what could be a good matchup potentially between I should say in Umag, but Zoomer and Taberner might actually be really good. So I'll take it back. But Darderi's decent favorite, minus 275. You have Carbelli at around 225. For the spread, minus 3.5 for Darderi, plus 3.5 for Carbelli. For the over-under, I see 21.5 games. The over is minus 120. The under is even money. For the set spread, you have Darderi straight sets at around plus 120, give or take. I see Carbelli to win ace sets around minus 150, give or take. And the over 2.5 sets is around plus 140. Now, I forgot to mention that for some of the other matchups, we had a limited amount of head-to-head stuff. Said before, Bublik and Dzanchel played twice. Kaza and Rinderknech played once. There's a ton of history between these two. They have faced off 7 times in their careers. However, I'm going to point out that the early rivalry, quote-unquote, was very lopsided in favor of Carbelli. You had a bunch of 3-setters, but Carbelli did win 3 of the first 4 meetings. However, after he ended up beating Darderi in Ecuador, it flipped, and Darderi has owned him ever since. Faced off 3 times since then, and Darderi has not dropped a set. Beat him in Peru later that same year, beat him in Italy in 2024 on clay, and beat him again in a different, once again, city in Italy a couple weeks later in 2024. So no meetings this season. Last meeting was about a year ago and change. But the point is Darderi went from being down 3-1 in the head-to-head to winning 6 straight sets, and they have been lopsided sets. Carbelli has not won more than 4 games in a set in 6 straight sets against Darderi. So it has been one-way traffic recently. Once Darderi kind of found his game a bit more, it feels like he's just a step ahead of Carbelli in the head-to-head. Now, for the actual path of both players, you've seen Darderi be tested as he had a 3-setter against Prismic on Thursday, and saying he ended up having a tough first set, then he won 6-0 in the second set. Like Bublik, though, He's off a title last week in Bastad, so he has been just dominant. He has won 7 straight clay matches. However, unlike Bublik, he has dropped some sets, so you might see maybe a competitive matchup based on Carabelli's mental toughness and his ability to find himself into some grueling affairs on the clay. Now, Darderi ended up beating, once again, 2 relatively underwhelming opponents based on ranking. Sang was good on clay, I believe it was in juniors, but in the pros, he's been, I'd say, okay at best on clay. Prismic is a challenger guy for the most part. He's a teenager, though. He will be a solid pro. But the point is, he's been dominant on the challenger clay season, and the fact is, he looked very good, but Darderi beat him anyway. Now, Carabelli, on the other hand, beat Pizarro in 3, and he ended up beating a relative unknown in Yalmas Ruiz in a set and basically 2 sets in the match on Thursday. So it's tough to compare who's had the easier path so far. I'd probably say it was Carabelli because Prismic was in crazy form from what we saw in the first couple rounds. And I do think you're looking at a spot where Darderi has looked like the better player. I said it earlier when I was recapping the quarterfinals. I thought the winner of the Prismic and Darderi match would win the event. And the fact that Darderi is a guy who just won a title last week, the crowd has a pretty interesting relationship with him. There's a lot of Italians in attendance, and the crowd got on his case a bit more. I like it. Darderi's been emotional in a good way. He's channeled it, and I do think that Carabelli doesn't really have enough weapons, in my opinion, to fully match the firepower that Darderi has. He's an okay server on clay, not amazing by any means. Darderi, though, his forehand's been great. His backhand's been solid. He has some slice variety, too. Carabelli, I think, had an easy path up to this point. And I do think that Darderi is going to win, in my opinion. So I'll go with Darderi in this one. Think the value, though, is on straight sets at plus money. Maybe it's like the Bublik play that we had with Shevchenko. I just see a talent disparity. I know Carabelli's better on clay than Shevchenko is, but it's the same argument. You have a guy off a title run who's been looking very sharp in the tournament after, and it's plus money to take him in straight sets. I think 120 is a very generous price for Darderi, who's been the best player based on eye test in this event. I'll go with it for me. I see people mentioning some parlay options in the comment section. I see Hydra mentioning Darderi and Bublik moneyline parlay at minus 130. I definitely don't mind that. I see Slick mentioning Bublik and Kaza for potential plus money. That could be an option too. Point is for this matchup, trying to find value. I do think Darderi should probably cover the spread in this one, minus 3.5. But I do think Darderi wins. I just think he's on a different level than Carabelli. And the fact that the last 6 sets in the head-to-head have been very lopsided in favor of Darderi is kind of the cherry on top there. So give me Darderi in straight sets of plus money. I think it's a good option for the guy who's been the best player in the field up to this point. Now, moving on to the line in the dark, we have no lines on the Taberner and Zoomer match. Why? I don't know. But we have no lines. Zoomer will be favored, and you're looking at Taberner, who should be a slight dog in this one. Now, for the path, Zoomer's been looking fine. Beat Drogot in 3, mainly because of an injury, and you saw him beat Wawrinka in straight sets. Taberner, though, has beaten some good competition. Beat Herbert, who's not great on clay at all. Beat Cerundolo, defending champion, in 3, and beat De Jong, who made the final in Bastad last week, who's in good form. So based on the eye test and based on the competition, Taberner's faced off against better competition up to this point, and I think the wrong guy might be favored in this one. I understand why De Zoomer will be favored because he has more experience, he's won titles before, and Taberner has not. But based on the path and based on, in my opinion, the eye test, I see a war here. I like the over 2.5 sets. I like the over in games. But for the actual value on the side, I think it's whoever's plus money I'll take. And I would be very surprised if Taberner was favored when the lines actually drop in this matchup. I have no lines, though. Apologies. I tried to wait it out. Couldn't wait out any longer. Give me the dog here, who I think is going to beat Taberner, but I'll go with the over 2.5 sets for this one. Anyway, it's going to wrap it up for the preview of the matchups in the semis. Time to move on into the lock and dog picks of the show. Before we get into the lock and dog, remember they're brought to you by our sponsor, MyBookie.ag, because they're available in a ton of locations. Use crypto for fast payouts. Use Padres Santo. You can also use MyBookie for MLB, WNBA, golf, and of course football futures and tennis. When you sign up, though, use the code SGPN to get a special 100% odds match up to 1K. Terms and conditions apply. MyBookie.ag promo code SGPN. We're also brought to you by Rhythm. because they have power trends, which are the best of the best for the house model, and they'll share all those plays with you. And a reminder, power trends are updated every day. They're only available in Rhythm, and you use them for baseball and for WNBA. Baseball, the hit rate is at 63%. For WNBA, the hit rate is at 63.6%. Download the app, check out Power Trends, start betting smarter. You can also try it for free for a week. Use a 7-day free trial by going to sportsgamblingpockets.com/rhythm to get your 7-day free trial. Welcome back, everyone, to the Tennis Game Podcast. Finished going through the semifinal matchups in Umag and in Kitzbuhel. Now it's time for the lock and dog picks. For the lock, I've been doing quite well so far in Kitzbuhel. At least I did yesterday. I'll try to do it again, or I should say today. I'll try to do it again tomorrow. I'm going to go back to the first match between Rinderknech and Kaza. Give me Kaza minus 1.5 games here at around minus 120. Shopping around, though, I did find the minus 116, so I'm quickly going to change the price there. But I do think it's a pretty good spot for Kaza. I think it's telling when a line moves that heavily on the younger player against Rinderknech. And he was good in Wimbledon, too. Like, he had a pretty good grass season. He's kind of parlayed it into a decent clay slate. And the fact is, Kaza went from minus 120 to minus 155. A lot of money's coming in on Kaza, and I agree with it, but I do think that the actual price now is too expensive on the money line. So give me the spread instead. Kaza, though, has won 6 of the last 7 matches, including last week. He's lost 1 set in the entire tournament, so he's been winning comfortably. He has not spent that much time on court. Rinderknech, though, has been a master of dropping sets. He's lost at least 1 set in 10 straight matches, including each of the first 3 rounds of this matchup against what you can argue is weaker competition. Hanfmann, I know, is good in Kitzbuhel. Seemed like he was a little bit out of it energy-wise or fitness-wise in that third set. But Gambus hadn't won a main draw event in a couple years. You saw Bagnes as a qualifier taken to the brink in the third set. I understand that Rinderknech has been winning, and I get his serve plays well on the courts here. But Kaz has been good, and the fact is, Kaza did not get broken against Struff. Think he's serving well, too. He won the only head-to-head meeting on clay in straight sets. I think he's the better clay player. I think this line makes sense. Give me Kaza minus 1.5 games at minus 116 as my lock for the show. For the dog, I'm going to go back to it in Umag this time. Give me Darderi in straight sets at plus 120. Same exact script that we had for the Bublik matchup against Shevchenko. You have the best player, in my opinion, in the event to win in straight sets against a guy who's worse than him at plus money. I'm going to take it. Darderi's won 7 straight clay matches, including the title in Bastad. He's been really good. Not going to overreact to dropping the first set against Prismic. Felt like he punted the set after falling behind a break early. Then he flipped the switch. He was really, really good, and I thought that his level in the last 2 sets was the highest I've seen from a player in this event. So, or maybe besides Taberner at a couple of moments there, but I do think you're looking at I'd say the better player winning in straight sets against the guy he's owned. Carabelli has won less than 5 games in 6 straight sets against Darderi. So not only has he lost 6 sets in a row, he hasn't even gone to 7-5 or 7-6. He's gotten blasted in the head-to-head recently. Good enough for me. Give me the plus money for this matchup. So once again, the play of the day here for the lock and dog, or I should say for the lock and dog for the semis here in Kitzbuhel and Umag. The lock's going to be on Kaza, minus 1.5 games of Rinderknech at around minus 116. I think it's a good spot for the youngster to get the job done. And for the dog, I'm going to go with Darderi straight sets at plus 120. It's going to wrap it up for the show. We'll be back once again for the final taking place in Kitzbuhel and in Umag. Till next time, good luck to all of you and all of your bets. Bye, everyone.